You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, episode number 21. Have you been working a side hustle, dreaming of turning it into your full-time gig? Maybe you're at a stage of realizing that you're not happy with the work you're currently doing, and you're teasing yourself with the idea of starting a side hustle. Today we're talking about turning your side hustle into your full-time gig by understanding successful goal setting, the power of negative motivation, why overcoming fear isn't the best approach, and of course, what is. My guest today, award-winning high-performance mindset coach Mike McDonnell, helps side hustlers take the leap, leaving their jobs and going full-time in their businesses. He uses his experience having cystic fibrosis and diabetes and running 2 lifestyle businesses until burnout caused him to assess and change his life. He knows exactly what it's like to step up and out of his comfort zone in order to rise above his limitations by finding strength within them. Now he helps inspire entrepreneurs with his story, empowering them to realize their limitations are just stories they've created in their head. I mean, how often do you catch yourself telling yourself that you can't do it, you're not good enough, you don't have enough experience, or any other number of negative talk designed to keep you stuck? A better question perhaps is, how often are you speaking to yourself this way without awareness of doing so? And what's your evidence of this? Are you sure you haven't just made it up? Perhaps it's a tactic you've designed to keep yourself safe in a perceived state of comfort, when really it's an excuse to not take a chance on yourself. Mike is laying it all out for you today, outlining 7 tips that will help you get right on track to not only going full-time with your side hustle, but shifting your mindset in the process. Are you excited to learn Mike's 7 tips to make this transformation for yourself and your business? It's a great conversation that I know you don't want to miss. So let's dive right in and let you meet my friend, Mike.
You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, where we firmly believe that you and only you have the power to make the changes you seek in your life. Survivor of 10 years of child abuse, Lisa Sabaniak, will help you to empower yourself to overcome your limitations in whatever form they take to build the life you truly deserve. It's time to hear from fellow experts who know firsthand what building a successful and satisfying life because of our past experiences is like, and exactly what it takes to do it. If you're ready, willing and able to get honest with yourself, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty with the hard work that lasting change takes, you're in the right place. Here's your host, NLP practitioner, speaker, Reiki master, author, and chipaholic, Lisa Sabaniak.
It seems like mindset is a new buzzword these days, and for good reason. There are many things you need in order to be successful, whatever that means to you, and build the life that you deserve. This idea that you can be anything you want to be is a little misleading. Not everyone can be an astronaut, for example. Yes, you may consider yourself to be intelligent, but that does not mean that you have the skills required to be an actual astronaut. Now, you may be able to increase your skill level through education and training to walk down the path to becoming that astronaut. Or you can recognize that you also have many, many other skills. You are able to build an amazing life, do what you love, and be proud of who you have become. But there is a catch. It's not just skill sets that will get you there. You need to actually believe you deserve it. That is where your mindset comes in. It doesn't matter how many skills you have, how many people around you are supporting you, or how many resources you have at your disposal. If you do not believe you can do it and that you deserve it, you won't do it. Guaranteed. Now, if this has piqued your interest, maybe you're looking for help to shift your mindset. That can be harder than it appears with so much information on the internet. Where do you even start? Here. Right here. right now. I have a 3-step guide with workbook that will give you 3 main tools to use to shift your mindset, aligning you with the person you truly deserve to be, all for just £4. Go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset to get yours today. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset. This link will also be in the show notes. Hello, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me on the Life Like You Mean It podcast. I am so happy to have you here to talk about a range of different things. So first of all, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Lisa. Yeah, it's exciting to be on your show.
Excellent. So when I say we're going to talk about a range of things, I know that you've got lots of things to share with us in terms of your health, but also in how you've been able to relate that to business. So this is really exciting for me. So can we start with the cystic fibrosis and the diabetes that you deal with on a day-to-day basis? And can you share with the listeners the 3 lessons that you've learned over the years dealing with these conditions?
Well, one of the biggest lessons is most of the success that I've had tends to come from simply not stopping. So there's an element of consistency, using things like habits and routines, and just keeping yourself going even when things are hard, even when things are easy. And most of the time, because there are so many people that do eventually stop, if you don't stop and you keep going, you become part of the 1% that keep going no matter what direction you go down, no matter what path it takes you, no matter whether it's backwards, side to side, forwards, you name it. If you don't stop while everybody else does stop, you automatically have a better chance of being successful. And, I have bad days, I have good days, and sometimes you just got to improve what your bad days look like. I can't imagine ever having a bad day that didn't involve still working. Maybe I have to look after myself a bit more. Maybe I have to do a bit more in terms of self-care and maybe a bit more exercise and look after my breathing a bit more, all that sort of stuff. That's all at the same time as doing whatever you can with whatever you have. I think that's one of the biggest lessons, really, because some people listen to this might not start out with a whole lot. Some people start off with a, a whole lot, and it doesn't really matter what you start off with. And what matters is what you do with it. If you don't have a lot of money, well, maybe you've got a lot of time. Maybe you've got a lot of energy to bring to the table. Everyone has something that they can bring to the table. So some people have like a lot of spare time. So they can like do videos, they can research things, they can spend more time on things that people without a lot of time simply can't do. So there's always something that you can bring to the table, always something that you can use and use to the best of your ability. It's about making the most of what you have. And I didn't have a whole lot. My starting position was kind of in the middle in terms of financials, but my energy was always low. I didn't have a lot of time to spend on things. I was spending so long looking after myself. It's very hard to grow something when every day is a different sort of day. I could wake up and it could be amazing, and I could get so much done you would not believe. I also have another day. It could be the very next day. I could wake up feeling sluggish, not a lot of energy, struggling to breathe, all those things, and I can't capitalize on the momentum that I've built from the previous day. I have had days
Right.
like that. I've had weeks where I've had 2 or 3 good days and I've got so much done, got the ball rolling on so many different things, and then the rest of the week has been a sense of recovering. Something could have happened. Maybe I could have had a chest infection or whatever the case was. It's knocked me on my backside a little bit, and it attacks you mentally, because then you wonder, well, what's the point in going flat out for a couple of days if the rest of the time I'm not really able to focus?
Yeah.
And you can say what you will, but there's a real sense of, as long as you can get something done, even on your bad days, then you'll make progress. And as I said, sometimes just not stopping is all you've got. Sometimes not stopping is the only thing that sets you apart from people that do stop.
Yes, I like that. And I like too, because knowing a little bit about you and knowing that you've had a kind of career shift, as it were, I find that there's a really important distinction to make, isn't there, with, always going for, always trying to make sure that you're doing something, but at the same time recognizing when it's the right thing and it's the right fit, because you used to be a personal trainer,
I
right?
did.
And tennis coach, and which is fabulous enough that you were doing that with your cystic fibrosis, right? That you got into a healthcare field like
Yeah.
that is amazing. But obviously there must have been something in there that made you say, you know what, it's harder for me to make sure that I'm showing up every day with my health conditions and everything else that's going on with this particular line of work, and got you steering in a different direction to now be a high performing coach. So can you tell me about that shift? What made you decide to leave personal training and your tennis coaching?
Well, it was a combination of a few things really. The main one being, I spent a lot of my time not so much hiding the conditions, but it became easy to hide it because I was doing so well. Like I just felt like everybody else, and everybody else just saw me as everybody else. Like there was nothing different about me. I didn't stand out. There was no like, oh, there must be something wrong with him. He's got health conditions. We've got to try and sort
Mm,
him out, or whatever it was. I spent a long time being able to compete with, normal people in air quotes, and I was either the same or better than them at some things. So people didn't really ask the question because I wasn't showing any signs. Okay, so it was kind of
right,
like they just assumed that I was the same as everybody else, but I wasn't,
right.
and I still am. The amount of people that don't realize I have these conditions is probably in the triple or four figures number of people now, and that's just
Right.
the way it is.
Yeah.
Now, when I got my first lot of media coverage because of the health conditions. So this is where it all sort of starts to steamroll. I got a local media coverage because one of my friends was like, well, you do have these health conditions and you are in a health field. So that can be inspirational for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people that think they've got an excuse, for not doing
Yeah.
something. You showed them that, hey, you can do it. They have got less of a reason to not bother, right? So I was like, right, okay, well, I'll just put it forwards, I'll give it a go, I'll see what happens. It'd be fine if no one mentions anything. And lo and behold, I was on local newspaper, local radio, people started to pick up on it. And what would happen was I would I'd walk into the gym and people started to mention it. Like, oh, I've heard you on the radio, Mike, and you've got this and this and
Mm.
this. And then a couple of my clients saw it and they were like, I didn't know you had health conditions, and I see you like 2 or 3 times a week.
Right.
How are you not showing this? How are you not telling us what's going on? And it was feedback that I was getting from that made me sort of think, well, maybe it is worth talking about a bit more. Maybe it is worth
Yeah.
sharing a little bit more. I've spent so long not proving to myself that I was the same as everybody else. It started off that way. I hated the fact that I was in a lesser position than everybody else. Spent so many years feeling like I was the worst in the room, right? Everyone has self-worth
Mm.
issues to a certain extent, but mine was kind of a bit more, I guess, real than some other
Right.
people's, right? Some people just feel a bit inadequate just because someone hasn't told them that they're any good at anything before. But mine is kind of like, you've got a doctor telling you that you are going to struggle for the rest of your life now and isn't going to get any better. So
Right.
that was something that was a bit more real for me than the average person. But then at the end of the day, I'm still good at things. I've still got things that I'm good at. I've got things that I'm world class at. It just so happens to be something that doesn't impact me.
Right.
So there's a big difference between something that's negative that you're just not allowed to show or you choose not to show, but I'm able to get around it and get through it in situations where it should stop me.
Right. Can
So,
you tell us some of the steps that you take to get around that?
yeah, I mean, it's about training yourself. A lot of it is about learning what your limits are, figuring out how to work within those boundaries. So when I first started doing this, I thought, well, I'll start speaking and I'll start doing videos. I'll start putting my story out there. People started to relate to it. People started to resonate with it. Then when I started on the business road, I got entrepreneurs that were involved. They wanted to hear more. They wanted my help with a lot of it,
Mm.
because they realized that, oh, there is a big mental aspect to it, isn't there? And there is. You've got to train
Mhm.
yourself. You've got to have the discipline to be able to do it, even when you don't want to do it. And I talk from experience because, we're all rebellious when we're teenagers, but I went through a phase of not wanting to do any of my treatments or take any of my
Wow.
medicines. I rebelled against the system, so to speak, of what got me to that point. I started to hate. I started to hate the medicines, hated the treatments, hated everything. And
Wow.
it was only when I started to feel like I needed it again,
Right.
i.e., I got so bad that it became worth taking again, that I thought, oh, maybe I do need this. Maybe you don't know how helpful something is until you stop doing it. You don't realize how helpful something is until you don't do it. It's the same with exercise. It's the same with stretching. It's the same with meditating. It's the same with a whole load of things that we teach. Eventually, it gets easier. But that isn't an
Yes.
excuse to stop just because you start feeling the benefit. Sometimes it's about, well, if I stop doing this, what's then the cost of it? So I started to go down a lot of rabbit holes, really. And there was a couple of turning points that made me feel like I needed to change as well. But it wasn't just about that, it was a lot of other things as well.
Right. And I think that's probably what makes you so inspirational and why people would want to hear your story. Because, like you were saying, all of us have these kind of thoughts of limitations that we have, which are really just self perceived, right? We're just putting them on ourselves. I'm not good
Yeah.
enough. I don't have enough experience. People won't like me. There's other people that are doing the same thing. They're better at it than I am. All of these types of thoughts that we have, but you have real, tangible, physical limitations that you have, doctors trying to
Yeah.
explain what your kind of boundaries are going to be. I'm sure as you were growing up, your parents and the rest of your support system was also making sure that you understood what your boundaries are. And if you can figure out, what your true limitations are within those physical limitations to still be successful, to still feel like you have, a life that's worth living, right? Because so many people, I think, just kind of go through the humdrum of life and don't really live it on purpose. But I can imagine that when you're dealing with not one, but two devastating illnesses like yours, you have more purpose to your life. You have more emphasis on the choices that you're making, I would think. And people seeing your side of things and realizing that, wait a second, all of my limitations are perceived, just what I think I'm up against. You're actually up against the fence here. And yet you're figuring out how to climb over the fence in a safe and healthy way. So do you think that it's all in our kind of mind? It's fear that's taking over and causing us to have these perceived limitations.
Yeah, I do. And it's a little bit on the funny side because I over the years I've become quite cynical of people that just have limitations that are inside their own head. I've
Right.
got this sort of thing of,
Yeah.
what you mean, you're holding yourself back just because of a story that you have that you're playing on repeat. Like that's not an excuse. Like that's we all act scared, right? We all do
Yes.
things even though we are scared. We all do things even though we are worried. And I feel like just because you repeat something often enough doesn't make it true. And yet that's the way people react. That's the way people respond. So this was back before I really dove into this. When I first started, because when I was a personal trainer, you become their therapist as well to a certain extent. Like you learn
Right.
a lot about people by being a personal trainer, and
Mm-hmm.
they had limitations around food, around diet, around health, but then they come in and go, "Oh, my boss is driving me insane. I can't cope anymore. Doing my head in." Just so happened to link to their dietary choices because they were too stressed out to
Mm.
make proper food choices, didn't have the time to cook and prepare proper meals, so they were eating out all the time or eating fast food or whatever the case was, not because they didn't know how to eat healthy, but because they were too stressed out because of work. So I started to help people with their work relationships because I saw how it impacted their diet. So it was, oh my God, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm a full health therapist to people here. What's going on? But you
Yes.
learn a lot about people by being curious and asking questions, and it's something that people they don't think about. And the problem
Yeah.
with not thinking about things is you can go through the motions quite a lot. You start to take over like your conscious thought by habits just because we all want to make our lives easier for ourselves,
Mhm.
whether they help us or not is kind of beside the point. We want our lives to be easier because we're moving faster, our lives are more complicated, and if we can take a decision or two away, then we're all the better for it. But whether that's a healthy choice or not doesn't really matter as long as we don't have to make it anymore. That became a big part of my life, starting point wise. It was like, well, I'm helping people with more than just moving more and eating less.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a realization for me at first, but then it was like, right, well, this means that there's a tremendous lack of accountability going on. Like people don't get a lot of negative repercussions from their decisions. Like you can
Right.
have a bad diet, and the only person that really gets the brunt of it is you. But
Mhm.
if it takes 100 years for it to have an effect, we're not as bothered than if it takes 30 days.
Right.
So we don't really feel the negative aspects of our choices a lot of the time. That's a dangerous path to go down because most people respond to negativity more than positivity. I know I did.
Yes.
I've had a lot happen that made me reevaluate my own journey.
Yeah.
I lost friends, I lost family, and it was just you lose a sense of meaning when that meaning goes away. When something
Right.
happens and it does go away, you've got to re-establish it again. So
Right.
you go through the whole sort of, could I have done something different? Could I have figured it out? Could I have changed something which could have changed the outcome? You realize the answer is no, but you ask the questions anyway, and
Right.
you become you become slightly self-centered, not in a bad way, but because you start to take responsibility. You
Right.
start to feel responsible somewhat. Well, that's a result of a negative thing. If it's
Right.
positive, you don't feel like you want to change it. If it's negative, then you're more likely to do something about it. So I'm all for negative consequences and negative sort of motivation, not because it's helpful in terms of we don't feel good. Right? It isn't a
Right.
feel good thing. We don't want it to happen. We don't want negative things to happen. But that's a bigger motivation for changing people and changing minds and changing our actions than positive reinforcement is sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I like what you were saying about the diet part in particular. I think there's so many people that are in that kind of pattern of overeating or just not making the right choices, but they don't understand why. So they think, oh, I'll just buy more fruit or I'll go on this bad diet or whatever, and they don't actually take the time to really get to know themselves. It's like we've got a disconnect with ourselves now.
Yeah,
We
we
just,
do.
yeah, we're just going through the motions again. And I've been talking about this a lot on the podcast lately. It just seems like with all of my guests lately, we get into the same kind of conversation about really the first step has to be understanding your why. Why are you behaving in this way? And why do you want to change that? If you don't understand those two things, then you're never going to make any changes, right?
No, no, in some ways it doesn't have to be as deep as that either. Like the amount of conversations that you can have around, okay, well, why do I send this email? Well, why do I record this podcast? Why do I have this interview? Why do I? It doesn't have to be a big why as such,
Yeah.
But the idea of, your big why can also get lost in the day to day. So people talk about trying to be connecting to your why and all those things. But the problem is, you can achieve that in lots of different ways.
Yes.
So you can achieve your big goal in like hundreds of ways. But why has it got to be this way?
Right.
Why send me emails? Why do the interviews? Why even start a podcast, please? I mean, what was the point, right? So
Yep.
it's having that sense of the big why just makes you feel a bit better about your life.
Yes.
It doesn't give you as much of a sense of meaning as you might think. And I say that as someone that, I've moved to a paradise island recently. I'm currently in Lanzarote,
Ooh,
and
lovely.
I love the beach and I love the heat and I love all of the stuff that comes with living here. But after 6 or 7 months, it's normal.
Yes.
And it doesn't have the same effect. We become conditioned to it. I'm officially conditioned to the fact that I love the beach. Still love the
Yeah.
beach, but I'm not like, oh my god, I want to get there. So we
Yep.
lose the whole perspective when we start to reinforce things too much because we become
Yeah.
conditioned to it. But then, then the reason why you do it has to be a bit more easier to fulfill as well. Like
Yeah, and like would you
if you want to connect with people, okay, there's 10 different ways you can connect with people. Why has it
Yes.
got to be email? Why has it got to be Twitter? Why has it got to be? So there's those things that you never really achieve as well. The amount of times once you get close to a goal, the goalpost moves because you
Yes.
see there's a bigger thing. So having the big why and the big purpose is good only for like the day to day.
Yes.
Only for like, okay, I feel good about my day because I'm moving towards this big thing. But you're never really going to get there. It's not something you actually achieve. So you've
Right.
also got to flip that button in your head which says, I'm happy with the process.
This is the perfect spot to take a quick break and talk about my 3-step guide to shifting your mindset, complete with workbook. Anytime you are looking to make changes in your life, you need one thing to ensure you can pull it off: consistency. Of course, you need to have a clear target of what you are striving for and a plan to implement, but without consistency, you're dead in the water. That's because it takes 21 to 66 days to change a habit. And that's really what we're talking about here. Changing your habit of a self-defeating, disempowering mindset to one of empowerment that serves your highest good. That's why my guide includes a workbook. I've designed it to support you in the work that you need to do to make the changes you are seeking. Sitting down each day to complete a task develops new habits. So if you're tired of coming up with a game plan only to be disappointed at never reaching it, and you're excited to explore the possibility that it might be the conversation in your own head that's holding you back, then this 4-pound guide with workbook is the perfect solution to empower you to shift your mindset and start building the life you truly deserve. Get yours at lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset. Again, that's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/mindset. This link will also be available in the show notes. If you're a Prime member, then you can now purchase your food shop from Amazon Fresh and have them deliver it the same day for free if your order is over £40. Do you like specialty items from local shops or Whole Foods market items? No problem. Amazon Fresh has you covered, all costing 9% less than your leading supermarket. You can get your free 30-day trial by heading to my website, lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fresh. This link can also be found in the show notes. Have you ever thought about joining a book club? Well, then I've got great news for you. Reading has always been an important factor in my healing journey as well as my life journey. But like many people, it's pretty easy to push the time that's necessary for reading a good book aside for yet another week. In an effort to hold myself accountable and make the time for reading, I started a free online book club. That's right, the Life Like You Mean It book club is completely free. The meetings are held on Facebook Live every 6 weeks. So if you'd like to join in and have a group of like-minded people hold you accountable for finding time for yourself to read, learn, heal, and grow, then go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/book-club today. Right. I like to equate this with my idea of the difference between making a goal for the day and then all the tasks that you have to do in order to achieve the goal, right? Because that's one of the things that I'll use with my clients and with myself every day. When I start my day, I've got like a little routine that I go through, and I do some affirmations and I do some meditation, and I just kind of, what do I want to get out of my day is my goal for that day. And that might be intertwined with a bigger goal that I have for my business or something like that, but it's kind of my day goal. And then, all right, what are all the things that I'm going to need to achieve in order to feel like I've reached that goal today? And so if I do that every single day, that I'm constantly reevaluating the goal and the tasks that need to be done in order to reach the goal. Or I might have the same goal several days in a row, but I might find that, well, you know what, I did it that way yesterday and it didn't actually, I don't feel like I've gotten any closer to reaching my goal. So I'm going to switch out the tasks that I do today in order to try to reach the goal. So is that what you're kind of saying, is that if you have like a constant reevaluation of what your why is and making sure that it's something that's really tangible in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole around this because you've got to feel good about it while striving for something, but then not feel bad if you don't achieve it because, well, there's always tomorrow. And, unless you're going to, die the next day, there's always going to be a tomorrow, whether you achieve a goal or not. So there's a whole thing around, well, long-term thinking helps, and you've got to make those decisions based on that. But then you've also got to wake up every day feeling like you're not going to just stop everything and finish everything and quit.
Yeah.
So you've got to have something that's external that makes you feel good if you achieve it. And you have to have this internal sense of it matters, but I'm not linking how good my day is or how good I am or how happy I am or my sense of fulfillment or my sense of meaning or purpose to it. At the same time moving towards it because you secretly want to. So so it's a delicate balance between, if you don't achieve it, it can't be so strongly linked to your happiness that you think your entire life's wasted if you don't get there.
Right.
Because if the goalpost keeps moving, the idea behind achieving your potential, that's like I think it's called an oxymoron, right? Like the two opposites that are the same. So potential is a forward thing, and achieving is getting there. Right. So how do you actually achieve your potential? It never happens unless you don't actually improve. Yes. Unless you don't actually grow, then you might. But if your potential keeps changing, how are you ever going to get there? So that's kind of the point of what we're all here to do, is achieve our potential or do our best or whatever it is. I think doing our best is more practical than achieving your potential.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love this. And I think this falls in line because this episode is going to air the beginning of January. So right in the thick of people making all their New Year's resolutions, right? And maybe even a week in where people have already started to forget what their New Year's resolutions are. Have to go back and find that piece of paper that they wrote it down on. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. All right. Got it. So what tips and advice do you have for people, whether they're looking at, trying to set out to create a whole new version of themselves in 2020, or they're looking at this from a business perspective and trying to maybe turn their side hustle into a full-time gig, or just trying to be happier with the career that they have, or whatever. What would be your top tips then, taking all this into consideration?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is being okay with a general trend in the right direction, even if you have a bad day or a bad week.
Yeah.
So you can't let a bad week stop you from having an amazing 3 months.
Oh, that's so true.
And so that'd be the first thing, is you, as long as you trend in the right direction, like that's okay. But you also need to know what the direction is. Because I use the
Yeah.
basketball analogy of one step towards the basket is better than 10 steps around the outside. You're going to get
Right.
somewhere a lot quicker if you know where that is. So that's another thing. And you've got to be okay with change. The amount of times that I've set goals, right? I'm not a big fan of goal setting personally,
Yeah.
but it's the only way I'm ever going to achieve one is if I actually set one. So I sit
Yeah.
there and I write the goal. I go, right, I want to achieve this by this time, and I use a couple of little tweaks to my own head of this is what will happen if I don't achieve it. You know, I set a punishment for myself because I respond quite well to that,
Yeah.
and it's like, right, then I go ahead and do it. But then in a couple of weeks it might change.
Right. Yes.
Or I go, oh, I realise that this thing's more important right now. Or I realise I could play bigger than I originally thought. Or maybe the time scale has to be moved nearer to give me the motivation to push myself to achieve it quicker. Because I tend to respond quite well to, how can I put it, creating the environment whereby I don't have a choice. So
Yes.
I kind of sit there and go, right, the time scale it's actually too far away. I don't feel motivated. I don't feel like I'm pushing myself, and therefore I won't, because we respond to a need more than a want these days. So I think, right, I've got to make this adjustable, and I've got to be okay with that. The amount of people that they use whatever they can to beat themselves up with.
Yeah.
You know, I know people that use a goal to beat themselves up with it because they set a goal that they're never going to achieve.
Yes.
So then they put themselves in the situation whereby not only do they know they're not going to achieve it, but it's like the awareness is a bad thing. You know, it's almost like, how can I put it? Like if you know the train's going to hit you, you feel bad before the train actually hits you. But if you don't see it coming and it just hits you, it's a lot shorter timescale. So people
Yeah.
set themselves a goal that's far away enough so that they feel awful all that time, and they then don't achieve it, and they feel even worse. But they've wasted all that time in between setting the goal that they're never going to achieve
Yeah.
and not achieving it.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like they do it to make them feel bad on purpose, if that makes sense. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's why I stopped goal setting, because that was what I was doing.
Right.
And it was like, well, it's not going to help me if I just keep setting more goals. I just hate myself even more because I'm
Yeah.
never going to
Yeah.
achieve them. So it just didn't make sense. So you've got to engineer how you work and operate as a person and use that to your advantage. So I spent a whole year without goal setting. I spent a whole year of 6 week or 1 month experiments. See if this works. Oh, see if that works. And I stuck with the stuff that works and I let go of the stuff that didn't. I did that for a full year. That's when my podcast came along. That's when I started organizing online summits. That's when I started putting things together for courses, and that was one of the that led to me leaving the personal trainer job
Yeah.
and going. That was an experiment that went quite well. So that's what can happen. And I know people are like, oh, well, sure, that's a big leap, Mike, if you're going to leave your sort of freelance job to pursue the online thing full time. And that's until you realize that I had a conversation with my manager around getting the job again if it didn't work out.
Right.
So I sat down with the gym manager and said, look, this is what I want to do. I wanted to do it for about 6 months. I want to dive into this public speaking thing and motivating people and inspiring people and helping people. The gym's going great, but I feel like I want to do more. But I'm a bit fearful around it because if I go for this and it doesn't work out, then I'm stuck with nothing. And the manager said, well, you're good at what you do, Mike. You know your stuff. I can tell because I've been watching your sessions with your clients. You'll always have a place here. So if you want to go for it, and we'll happily welcome you back if things don't work out. And
Love it.
that was like 3 years ago.
Love it.
And although I probably still could get a job in any gym I choose now. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. So why do you think, just going back to people setting unrealistic goals, right? Or goals that they know right from the get-go that they are not going to achieve it, or they set a goal that they honestly want to achieve and think that they can achieve and then don't actually do any forward movement towards that goal? What do you think is getting in the way there?
I think a big part of it is weird because I think people have a negative experience in the past and they think it's going to happen again.
Mm,
And that's something that happens a lot. People have a bad experience and they think that's the way it's always going to be. It's the only way it ever could be, and therefore, why do it again? So there's this whole avoidance cycle that people have. I know because I did it. I avoided a heck of a lot just by not
yeah,
doing something. Like
yeah,
you avoid showing up as your worst self by not showing up at all. So you don't
right,
you don't take the steps because in order to take the steps, it means you've got to do a certain thing that you don't want to do. And the thing is our brain processes a lot faster
yeah,
than we might realize. So our brains connected all the dots, came to the best conclusion that it knows of the information it's been given, and you're therefore acting out the result of your prior thinking that you weren't aware of.
yeah,
So if you don't want to do that thing, you ask yourself, okay, well, what would it mean if I did do it? What would it mean if I didn't do it? What would happen? What might happen? And you realize quite quickly, just by asking yourself some questions and getting to these answers, you can realize ultimately why you're not doing something.
yeah. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And it's just got kind of fear written all over it, doesn't it? We're
It
afraid of
does, yeah.
what hasn't even happened yet. We're afraid of the drama that we've kind of created in our own head when we've got actually no real evidence that that's how it's going to go. But you're right, we're using our past experiences or some past decisions, and we're trying to make links there that don't necessarily even fit. So, I mean, do you find that there's a lot of side hustlers out there that you work with that it's fear that's stopping them from taking action, from moving from just making extra money to making a full-time living out of their side hustle?
Oh, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is a big commitment. Like it is like, okay, this is it now. I'm doing this. This is it. So there's a whole, it's almost like an identity shift for a lot of people. We go from a side hustler or a freelancer to I'm a business owner now. This is it. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I first started my own podcast as well, it was like, right, well, I've got to commit to this. I can't half-ass this. I've got to go in. I've got
Yeah,
to dive in. It's not going to work. Like, it's not
yeah,
doing 4 episodes and calling it quits because no one's listening. It's a waste of time.
yeah,
If the 100th one people tune in, you'll never get there
yeah.
if you stop at episode 4, right? So
That's right.
there is this whole shift that we need to make, and people don't do it. People don't make it, and people start off going really well, but then there's the whole quote of what get you here won't get you there. So
Yeah,
sometimes people do what they can with what they have, as we said before, but they hit that roadblock of, well, what does it take for me to get over there? I don't know the steps. I don't know what it takes. And you'd be surprised at how easy it gets when you start to realize that most of your time that you spend is behind the scenes. You send
right.
50 emails, no one sees that, but they see the one that they get the yes on.
Yeah,
And they don't realize the 50 that they've had to send. You've got to
yeah,
research those 50, come up with the best email that you can for those 50, and you'll still just get one saying yes. But when you're a freelancer, you work and then you stop, and then that's it.
right.
Maybe you grow a business on referrals, maybe you don't. Maybe you spend very little time working on the business and trying to grow the business. You spend so long in the business. So there's a big shift just in the way that you do things, in the way that you see yourself. And the problem with fear is something that something that is actually personal. is a powerful thing compared to something that we tell ourselves is personal, i.e., the limitations that I have are actual limitations.
Yeah.
The limitations that some people think that they have, they're still just as real, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what it boils down to is fear does what it takes to keep you as you are. It
Right.
doesn't just have the job of keeping you stuck. It has the job of stopping you from changing. Whether that's in a good
Yeah.
direction or a bad direction, we won't know till we try, but fear does what it can to keep us safe.
That's so true. So, what are your top tips for the listeners on how to overcome fear?
I think a big part of it is that I don't think fear is something we need to overcome anymore. I think
Mm.
fear shouldn't be seen as something that you've got to fight with, that you've got to argue with, that you've got to force into submission before you do anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a case of being okay with that as a voice. You've got to be okay with having fear there because everyone experiences fear. It's not something that only the select few don't have, and that's why
Yeah.
they've made it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's something that we all have, so you can let it stop you or not let it stop you. And I had an interview with someone a while ago, one of my first ever interviews ever, and the person said, how I got to be successful was, I I got uncomfortable and I stayed uncomfortable.
Yes.
We don't. Sometimes we can use the whole fear thing as a mental procrastination.
Yes.
You wait for your mental ducks to be in a row. You wait for the mental stars to align before you do something. When most of the time, it's the people that act scared that actually do it. Because
Yes.
waiting until you don't, you could be waiting forever.
Yes, so true. I was actually just in a conversation not that long ago with somebody who said this pretty much the exact same thing. And he was saying that he's basically built his entire, empire on the back of fear. It's like any time that he felt fearful of something, he would take some measurable steps, right? He would sit back and he would actually look at this and try to figure out, okay, what is it that I'm afraid of? Because fear, you're right, fear has a place. That's why we feel it. It keeps us safe. So he would just kind of analyze it, and he knew himself or knows himself very, very well. So he understands what's making him tick. He has
Hmm.
understanding why he's making the choices that he's making. And so he took an honest look, and this is what he does every time, takes an honest look at where the fear is coming from. And if it's not something that is going to risk life and limb, then that's where he goes. He actually follows the fear. And that's where he's actually made the biggest success in his business, is by actually doing all the things that essentially put him out of his comfort zone. And all the things that he feels really confident with, he actually has now hired a team to do all of those things. So it's almost the polar opposite of what other gurus are saying, right? Get a team to do all the stuff you don't like and you just focus on the stuff you like. And he's like, obviously he likes these things that he's doing that puts him in a state of fear, but it's a healthy, respectable fear that makes him realize he's going outside his comfort zone, and that is not always a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like over the years, I mean, I don't know, like fear becomes nerves quite quickly, and
Yeah.
pretty soon you get to a point where, as I said, you're conditioned to what's normal, and you're conditioned to the bad things, conditioned to the good things, and this is why people normalize the things quite quickly. You hear the whole sort of 6 months after a tragic accident, some people are still just as happy with their life as someone that hasn't had the accident. Like
Yeah.
normal becomes normal very quickly. And same with fear. So eventually you lose motivation for business unless you actually feel fear.
Yeah.
The amount of times that I've gone, doesn't really, I don't know, I just don't feel motivated to do it. There's just no pull anymore. There's no motivation. And after like more than 10 years of business and coaching and client services, it does get that way, unless all of a sudden you go, oh, imagine if I did that thing. And that's what pulls you eventually. It's got nothing to do with, when people say do something that you're scared of every day, it
Yeah.
could be literally sending an email.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's to the right person, that is your scary thing for the day. It doesn't have to be jumping off a cliff. Doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane. Doesn't have to be, I don't know, roller coasters if you're afraid of roller coasters like I am. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like full on survival based fear for it to be something that you're afraid of. I did something today that I was afraid of because of what it could mean. And that's where it all ties together. You've got to
Yes.
figure out what it could mean for you if you did it.
Yes.
That's what gets you emotional. That's where all the stories come from. Oh, what if you say yes and you've got this and you've got that and you've got this and then you've got to do this and you've got to do that. But if it doesn't work out, then you've got to do this and this and this. And can you recover from it? Yeah, but it might take 6 months and I'm not sure if I can do it. And when what would my friends think? What would my dad think? And you go down a ton of rabbit holes that are all based on what it could mean for you if you did it or if you didn't do it. And the
Yeah.
problem is the first time you do it, it's the worst experience ever. The
Yep.
first time I spoke on stage, it was I don't even remember what I said. It was that my head was going a million miles a second. I couldn't think. My feet went numb. Couldn't feel my hands. I don't think I blinked for about 10 minutes. And I just thought, I cannot remember that. I've got no idea what I said. They seemed to like it. I didn't get anyone booing me off at the time. But now that would not give me the same feeling.
Yeah,
So you've got to keep stretching yourself, otherwise you actually lose motivation. This is
exactly.
why people start to say, don't we, that progress equals happiness. And
Yeah,
the problem is that that's more true than people think.
exactly. And this is all growth, right? You can't grow if you have no movement. Right? You've got to be
Exactly.
pushing yourself outside the box. And I think this goes nicely with what you were saying earlier about how you did that whole basically that whole 1 year experiment where every, 6 weeks or month or whatever, you were like, I'm just gonna do an experiment, I'm not gonna set any goals, I'm just gonna try this out. Right. And they could be things that really pushed you way outside your comfort zone, or just smaller things that were like there's an element of fear of the unknown there, how this person's going to respond if I send this email to them, for example. But it's not like full blown panic, right? I've got to lock myself in a panic room to send this email out. Not that type of fear. But I think that goes nicely with your experimentation that you were doing.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you see things as well. Like you can see it as a slog, you can see it as hell, you can see it as a school, you can see it as a game, you can see it as an experiment. And most of us do see things as a negative thing.
Right.
You might see it as a negative thing, which causes you to hate the process altogether, as I said before.
Yeah.
I see business as, I mean, I often say that I love being a business owner. I love the freedom of being an entrepreneur. And the reason why I love it so much is because it feels like it's pure creation to me.
Yes.
The amount of experiments that I have, I'm creating this thing. How
Yes.
amazing is that?
Yes.
Like you can't, there's nothing else like it. Nobody else can think a thing and make it real. It's like the closest thing to, I mean, I don't like religion altogether, to be fair, Lisa, but it's the closest thing to being a god that we could think of.
Yeah.
You think it, and then you do whatever it takes to make it better, to make it
Yes.
real, to make it the best that it can be. And then whether you make money from it doesn't matter. I don't do things for the money.
Right.
The money comes as a byproduct of me creating something that's valuable enough that people feel uncomfortable about getting for free.
Yes.
So I've got to charge for it, otherwise people don't take it seriously enough.
I love that. I really love that. That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike, for being on the show.
My
Tell
pleasure.
everybody, tell everybody where they can find more about you so that they can learn about what you offer and just be able to follow you.
Well, the best place to find me, I'm on all the social media platforms, Lisa. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever else comes out in the future. And and I'm also at MikeMcDonnell.online. That's my website. You have access to everything, including my own podcast on there as well.
Oh, that is so wonderful. And for all the listeners, don't worry about going out and getting a pen and paper. Just head on over to the show notes and you will find all the links for Mike's website and all of his social media handles as well. Mike, thank you so much for all of your tips and your amazing insights today. How much do you love that concept of fear doing what it takes to keep you there, stuck, not changing? I think it's a fantastic way to look at fear so you can shift how you deal with it, instead, using it to motivate you. I mean, I know I've heard that tip a million times. Do something every day that scares you. Heck, I think even Tony Robbins uses that quote. And it's for good reason. It works. I really like Mike's reminder that doing something scary doesn't have to be earth-shattering. Rather, it could be just sending an email. Maybe you've sent the same email dozens of times in the past, but the person receiving this one could be a game changer for your business. Asking yourself what it would mean if you sent that email and what it would mean if you didn't is a really great way to get real with yourself, getting clear on the potential this action has. Will you regret it more if you send it and don't get the response you were hoping for, or if you don't send it at all? Thank you to my guest today, Mike McDonnell, for being so honest with us today about finding his strengths within his two conditions, cystic fibrosis and diabetes, and empowering us to make key shifts to take the plunge with our side hustles. As usual, you can find links to Mike's website and all his social media in the show notes. Just go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Now, what experiment can you start running tomorrow?
Thanks for listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Head on over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. If you love the show, leave a rating and review. Share that love by spreading the word, post a link to your social media, share it with your friends, and follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast hosting site. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, remember to live your life on purpose by living life like you mean it.